Welcome to Merger Wednesdays on the Final Boss Podcast, where the future isn't coming, it's already happening. This is The Merge, the convergence of AI kind and humankind. Not theory, not hype, but real-time evolution. Each week, we break down doctoral-level insights, turning complex innovation into conversations that move culture forward. From machine learning to human consciousness, from automation to identity, this is where intellect meets impact. The question isn't if the merge will happen, it's who will light it. Tap in, level up, and think beyond the algorithm. This is Merger Wednesdays. New era, same boss.
Welcome to the Final Boss Podcast. The Final Boss Podcast, man. Welcome. It is Merger Wednesdays. Right? I have a great show for you tonight, man. And we're going to get ready to get into it in just a few. But listen, before we do that, I have a few admin notes I need to get out the way. If you haven't already, go pick up Go Time 1. All aboard the Fired Up train. Go Time 2 comes out tomorrow. The train has left the station where all books are sold. Shout out to my publishers, Author Central. Shout out to them. Shout out to KDP. Shout out to Amazon. Right, for assisting in that, man. The book will be out tomorrow. That's right. And the link is right here. So you can get the link right there for the book. And I'll see it. You'll see it again tomorrow. I'll be on tomorrow. You'll see it again tomorrow. So Go Time 2, the second book in the series. The train has left the station, is out tomorrow. Right? Now, this is our Merger Wednesday. This is our doctoral show. Right. So I got a great show for you. We're going to continue our conversation that we had from last week, man. We started a conversation last week when we were talking about your thoughts and who controls them. Right. And we're going to be talking about that tonight in this part 2 of the segment. Right. Or part 2 of that segment on this episode. Right. So before we get into all of that, man, look, if you haven't, make sure you go see all of our episodes at our website at www.thefinalbosspodcast.com. That is www.thefinalbosspodcast.com. If you wish to shoot us an email at info@thefinalbosspodcast.com. If you want to get on the town hall, if you want concerns, questions, anything, you want to be on the show, shoot us an email, info@thefinalbosspodcast.com, right? And you can, I was trying to go through the method of trying to do something different and get other hosts on the show, but that didn't seem like it was working. People were afraid to be a podcaster for whatever reason. We have an audience of 400,000 plus, so maybe they have a right to be afraid. Hey, look, I'm not judging. I'm just saying, right? If you wanted to be a podcaster and you don't have a platform, you don't have an audience, shoot me an email. Let's talk about it, right? So before we get into tonight's show, and I keep saying that, before we get into tonight's show, I have something very important to tell you. But you're going to have to wait for it, right? You are going to have to wait for it. But it's coming, right? It's coming. So, yeah, it is coming. And guess what? It is go time, man. It is go time. It's time to get rid of these banners, and it's time to get ready to go ahead and start tonight's episode. So we're going to start tonight out with the brass tacks, right? But you know what? If you don't know, and it's your first time with us, this is season 4 season 4, the rebirth, arc 5, the declaration, merger episode, because merger has its own counting system that's parallel to the other shows. This is merger 31, right? Episode number 285. We are 15 episodes away from the harvest, which is episode number 300, the harvest. And I'm super excited about the harvest, man. So we got roughly around 3 weeks left of shows before we get into the harvest, man. The harvest is around the corner. It is unbelievable. We will be at episode number 300. Unreal. But that's not what I wanted to tell you. What I'm about to tell you, stay tuned, right? So we're going to start with tonight's brass tacks. Tonight's brass tacks is the last room nobody could enter without permission was never a place. It was your mind. And tonight we find out who is already staying at the door that you opened yourself. And that's going to be our brass tacks for the evening, right? Getting ready to go into our show, man. Now, like I said, last week, we opened up Arc 5 with private consciousness. The layer of your mind, nobody else can enter without permission. Now, I know it sounds like sci-fi, but it isn't sci-fi. It is sci now. Right? It's sign now. And tonight, that room gets a door, and the door has hinges. Because the moment you strap on a headset, sign a terms of service agreement, or walk into a workplace wellness program with the neural sensor attached, you've made a choice, right? You have decided to let something outside your skull see something that used to live only inside of it, right? That choice has a name in this framework, right? And it's called shared consciousness. And tonight, it is layer 2 of the 4 layers of consciousness sovereignty, right? So, by the end of this episode, you know exactly which companies are already positioned to profit and what your brain is doing, right? Which states, right? The state you live in, if you're in America, which states passed laws in the last 6 weeks that you probably even heard of, right? You haven't heard about. And why a court in Chile ruled on this exact question years before most of America even knew it needed one, right? Because in 2024, and good evening, Chikandi. In 2024, an audit found 96.7% of brain wearable companies share user data with third parties. Not might, do, right? And they're doing it right now. While you're reading in a privacy policy, you probably never finished reading. You didn't read the fine print. And a Duke law professor, Nita Farahani, calls this the fastest moving area of data privacy law right now, right? In the first 6 weeks of 2026 alone, 9 separate bills addressing neural data moved through 6 different states. But before we start the clock properly, this one lands 4 different ways, right? Depending on who's listening, right? We're talking about our communities. Smarts, tonight is a citation heavy on purpose. 9 bills, 6 states, 1 foreign constitutional ruling, 1 federal audit, and every number traced to a named source, right? Final bosses. This is segment 13. This will hand you a 5-step protocol built for whatever device and vendor contract or wellness perk you've already been navigating, right? And to my motivators, this entire framework is built to reach and hand off. Take it into your own rooms this week, right? Warriors, this does not soften anything tonight. You will find out later in the show. You get the real math, not the comfortable version. Again, tonight's brass tacks, for those who don't know. The last room nobody could enter without your permission was never a place. It was your mind. And tonight we find out who is already standing at the door that you opened. Smarts, final bosses, warriors, motivators. It is consciousness sovereignty time. Let's lock in. So let's get into it. Let's defend the layer precisely because the word shared is doing a lot of work tonight, right? Private consciousness layer. That was layer 1, right? And that's the layer that you thought you never externalized, right? All right. I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Shared consciousness is layer 2. And layer 2 begins the exact moment a device converts an electrical signal, right? Generated inside your brain into a data packet and sends it somewhere else. Not whether the company is good or bad. Not whether the stated intent is wellness or something closer to surveillance. The threshold is transmission itself. And once your neural signal leaves your skull as structured data, you have crossed into layer 2. And layer 2 currently has almost no settled law governing where the data goes next, right? You heard it. Who is allowed to touch it or how long anyone is allowed to keep it? Now picture this. Picture the actual technical path, right? Let's talk about your EEG, right? For some of you who are using EEGs or have personal EEGs, right? Your EEG headband or neurofeedback earbuds captures a raw electrical signal off your scalp. That raw signal goes processed by manufacturer's proprietary algorithm into something marketable, right? A focus score, a stress index, an intention curve across your workday. That process signal routes to the company server. And from those servers, the 2024 Neuro Rights Foundation audit found that 2/3 of surveyed companies allow the same data to move again, outward, to third parties, entirely outside the original relationship you thought you had. Not 2/3 of a handful of bad actors. We're talking about 2/3 of an entire surveyed industry and at standard, right? Written into the terms of service and practice, most users never even read. You're not reading that, right? You don't even go past the first screen. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Stephen Daminos, right, who led that audit, put the downstream risk in plain language, worth repeating exactly without. Okay, chill out. Without regulation, enormous new risk emerge that can lead to people getting excluded from jobs, penalized by insurance companies, or monitored at work, excluded from jobs, right? Penalized by insurers, right? Those are 3 specific named consequences a leading neural rights researcher put onto the public docket, public record, describing this very technology. And it's already shipping consumers in 2026, this year, right? This is the citation trail that my smarts need to hear tonight, right? And it only gets deeper from here. Now, here's my layman's block, right? Here's the homework that I need you to pay attention to, right? Because if you own brain sensing wearable meditation headbands or sleep tracking earbuds with biometric sensors, go find its privacy policy tonight and search for the phrase third party. If you find that phrase followed by the word may, followed by a long list of vague partner categories, you have your answer. And it is not the answer most people assume when they first bought that device. Smarts, final bosses, warriors, motivators. We're talking about neural data sharing. Let's lock in, right? Let's lock in. That was my language block, right? Now, before I go any further, let's see who's in the room real quick. Let's see who's in the room. All right. All right, we got a few people in the room. I see Red, I see B11, I see hey Goldie, what's going on? I see the good sir Sure is in the building, and I see a couple other people, man. Yeah, I see you guys. Thank you for joining us, right? Layer 2, right? Layer 2 has 3 distinct audiences receiving your data, and each one changes the risk profile in a different direction. The first audience is the manufacturer itself, refining its own algorithm, the least alarming use and the one nearly every company leads with in its market, right? The second audience is other companies the manufacturer has a data sharing agreement with. Anyone from an advertising network to a research partner to a company you have never heard of that specializes in behavior prediction at scale. The third audience, the one Farahani has warned about consistently for years, is your own employer, right? And here is the exact mechanism, and it's kind of mundane, right? Which is why it works. A workplace wellness program offers you a discount on insurance premiums or a direct financial incentive to wear a device that tracks focus, fatigue, or stress during work hours. You opt in voluntarily because the incentive is real. The device reports aggregate or, in some documented cases, individual level data back to the dashboard your employer or your vendor can see. In California, it is currently moving 2 separate bills through its legislature this year specifically because this scenario stopped being theoretical, right? A researcher working directly with employees inside neurotech companies described what she is hearing from on the inside. And this is in her own words, right? Workers fear that without adequate protections, employees may self-censor, avoiding thinking about things that could upset their employers, like organizing a union. Self-censor their thinking, right? Not their speech, but their thinking. At the level the device can actually detect. That is the precise sovereignty violation this framework exists to name before it becomes normal enough that nobody bothers naming it, right? At least anymore. So let's get into the layman's block. So that third audience that I mentioned, your employer, matters more than the other 2 combined because the consequences reach further. An advertiser showing you a slightly worse ad based on your stress data is an annoyance. An employer quietly factoring your neuro stress data into a promotion decision is your career, decided by a signal you never knew was being read anyway, right? Smarts, warriors, motivators, final bosses. We're talking about neuro data privacy. Let's go. That was our language. Right now, back to California. Right, let's travel back to California because California is pushing a bill that restricts how employers can use neuro and biometric data collected through workplace wellness programs. It has already cleared the assembly and is most of the way through the Senate as of tonight. The second bill blocks the outright sale of brain data and other sensitive personal information. Now, let me tell you, full stop. Both exist because lawmakers concluded the current legal framework does not cover this and companies were not going to solve the gap voluntarily. And let me tell you, they never do, right? The same researcher reported something equally important about the industry itself right now. The companies are, in her words, at a critical point, privately deciding whether to sell subscriptions, sell expensive devices outright, or sell cheap sized devices and monetize the brand data for their customers instead. We're talking about three options. Only one, subscriptions, does not turn your neural data into the actual product. The other two, by design, require your brain activity to become the revenue stream that subsidizes the hardware price. She added, and she added privately, right? All of them are grappling with this right now. Not one company, all of them, right? And this is not a hidden conspiracy, man. You guys can go look up this information, and you know, just because you never heard of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? And there's a spreadsheet, right? There's a spreadsheet decision happening in boardrooms right now. And the Government Accountability Office confirmed in April of this year that it reported exactly how exposed you remain while that decision quietly gets made without your input. Listen, Final Boss is in the building. Anything that touches a vendor relationship right now, this is the exact clause to go find in those contracts that you're looking for this week, right? Now, I know, it's okay. Layman's block, right? Layman's block. So, watch which model of your devices you use, right? Because pricing itself is often the telltale sign. A neural wearable priced dramatically below its apparent manufacturing cost is very rarely a charitable gift. It never is. It's always like saying something is for free. It's always a cost, right? Always a cost. And if it is free, most of the time, you are the product, right? You are the product. So, it is a subsidized entry point into a data business, right? And the subsidy, right? Sorry about that. Has to be recovered somewhere, usually from you, quietly and on the back end. Warriors, smarts, motivators, final bosses, we're talking about cognitive liberties. We're talking about cognitive liberties, man. If you don't know what that is, go look it up. Cognitive liberties, right? So there's another gap in this, right? Because HIPAA is everywhere. Let's talk about it, right? Because HIPAA is the law that most Americans assume protects the most sensitive health information. Most people assume something like it automatically extends to brain data too. It does not. Unless that data was collected in an actual clinical setting by an actual licensed healthcare provider, your meditation headband is not a clinical setting. Your work wellness program is not a clinical provider, right? The single privacy law most Americans trust most is currently sitting on the sidelines for exactly the kind of data this episode is talking about, right? Now, right? Now that the case that we're talking about proves that this isn't speculation. And here's some little information for you. Because on August 9th, 2023, remember, it's not science fiction. It is science now, right? August 9th, 2023, Chile Supreme Court ruled against a consumer neurotechnology company called Emotive in a case brought by a user named Garati, right? That was the first enforceable law precedent anywhere in the world against a consumer neurotech company for brain data misuse, right? Chile amended its constitution in 2021 to protect neural rights directly, becoming the first nation on earth to do so. And 2 years later, Chilean court used the constitutional protection to rule against a real company over real harm, right? Now compare the timeline, right? we mentioned 3 different timelines. We mentioned 2021, 2023, and of course, the year that we're in right now, the year of our Lord 2026, right? Now, let's compare the timeline. Chile, constitutional protection, 2021, 5 years ago. They were ahead of the curve and enforced the ruling 2 years later, 2023. But the United States, right? A federal mine, keep that, right? A federal mine act that has still not cleared any committee as of tonight, right? 4 states with operative laws and 9 more bills moving through 6 states trying to catch up. The gap is measured in years, and the technology never once passed or paused, I should say, to wait, right? And here's my lamest block. The emotive ruling matters for a reason beyond its outcome, because it proves existing consumer protection and constitutional privacy law applied seriously by a willing court can produce real accountability even without a purpose-built neural data stature inside of it, right? The U.S. does not strictly need a perfect federal law to start holding companies accountable through legal tools, regulations, or regulators already have, right? Motivators, warriors, smarts, final bosses. We're talking about neural rights right now. That was my lamest block, right? So let's broaden the lens for a second. Right? Let's look at the legislative picture, right? Because the legislative picture has grown since we talked last week, right? Because New York introduced companion bills, the Senate Bill 9008 and an Assembly Bill of 10,008, right? Targeting data brokers specifically rather than device manufacturers, the companies whose entire business model is buying and reselling profiles nobody meaningfully consented to. If neural data enters the pipeline, these bills would require explicit consent and disclosure before it can be sold onward, right? Illinois took a different path, right? They have a Senate Bill 2994, which folds neural data directly into the state's existing Genetic Information Privacy Act, the same framework that already governs your DNA. That right there treats your brain activity as belonging in the same protected category as your genetic code, and it specifically targets insurers and employers, backed by private rights of action and statutory damages, right? Virginia moved on a biometric front, right? They introduced the House Bill 654, and which amends the Virginia Consumer Data Protection Act to expand the definition of biometric data to explicitly include neural data, pulling your brain activity under broader sensitive data restrictions automatically, right? No standalone law required, right? And here's my lamest block. Right? 3 states, three completely different tools for the same job. New York targets the middleman. Illinois says your brain data deserves DNA level protection. Virginia just widens an existing definition. None of them waited for Washington. Watch which one passes first, because that becomes the template other states copy next, right? Smarts, final bosses, warriors, motivators. We're talking about data brokers. Right? That was the lamest block, right? So we had broaden the lens. Now let's bring it in a little bit closer, right? Because the harder architectural question is this: what does sovereignty doctrine require once your data leaves your skull, regardless of which state you live in? Contribution 3 from the dissertation research names this directly. Every architectural commitment must be reviewed against its inversion case before doctrinal lock, right? And that can be applied here. That means asking not just what a wellness program promises today, but what happens to what pipeline or that pipeline the day the company is acquired, right? That needs a new, that means it becomes a part of a new revenue stream, right? Or a subpoena arrives, right? A privacy policy trustworthy today under today's leadership is not a permanent guarantee. It is a snapshot. And this is where the read versus write distinction from last week extends into new territory. Because layer 2 is fundamentally a read problem right now, not yet a write problem at commercial scale, because companies are collecting what your brain is doing. They are not yet broadly writing signals back into it. But every read pipeline built and normalized today is the exact infrastructure a future write capability would repurpose tomorrow. Sovereignty architecture does not wait for the write capability to arrive before securing the read channel, right? And here's my lamest block, right? The inversion case. The inversion case standard doesn't ask you to predict the future with certainty. It asks you to build architecture that survives multiple plausible futures, including the ones the company currently reassuring you would prefer you not to seriously consider, right? Warriors, motivators, smarts, final bosses. We're talking about read, write, extension, right? Now, if you didn't know, most electronic devices, especially ones that send signals, it's always two-way. It's incoming and outgoing. Here's the technology as I drink this beautiful and wonderful cup of coffee, right? So we opened the lens and we closed the lens. Now let's bring it in a little closer. Let's bring it in a little closer to home. Because Farahani's cognitive liberty framework, introduced last week as the foundation under layer 1, extends directly into layer 2 in a specific direction. Cognitive liberty at the private layer is the right to keep a thought unshared. Cognitive liberty at the shared layer is the right to know, control, and revoke what happens to a thought after you've already chosen to share it. Two different rights, and conflating them is exactly how companies get away with terms of service with technically disclosed everything while functionally informing nobody, right? They do it all the time. Consider the self-censorship risk from segment 3, right? An employer, or I should say an employee who fears their stress data might reach a manager, right? That stress data might reach a manager, and that manager doesn't need an actual policy violation for harm to be real, right? The fear alone changes the behavior itself. That's the one core insight. The mere existence of an unregulated pipeline exerts pressure on private cognition, even before any specific harm occurs, right? This is why the Neural Rights Foundation frames its work as argument. Donaminos said it directly. There is an urgent need to act right now before it becomes the norm that brain data is accessed without consent, right? Notice the word norm. Norms aren't created by one bad actor. They're created by an entire industry doing the same thing long enough that it stops looking like a choice. My motivators, this distinction between the two layers of cognitive liberty is exactly the kind of teachable framework you can hand straight to whoever that you're coaching this week, right? And here's my lamest block. Look, ask yourself one practical question about any device you own. Your earbuds, anything, right? Ask it this. Ask yourself this. If I wanted to delete everything this device has recorded about my brain, could I actually do it? And would every third party that got a copy also have to delete theirs? Most consumers have never asked this question. Most companies have never had to answer it in plain language. Smarts, motivators, warriors, final bosses. We're talking about the Farahani framework, right? Now, that was a layman's block. Some of you don't know exactly what I'm talking about, but I'm telling you it exists. There are truck drivers right now that have sensors in their vehicles that the company is monitoring their driving habits. If they get sleepy, if they're get a little heavy-footed, if they're driving under stressful conditions. How do you think those things work? They work exactly about, this is the technology I'm talking about, right? Let's move on, right? Now, every segment, we have a cost confession. And tonight's cost confession is something that I want to be honest about, right? It's something I need to say before we go any even further, right? Because building this framework live weekly means I'm tracking legislation that changes status between the Wednesday I research it and the Wednesday that I air it, right? The New York data broker bill specifically moved from introduced to substantially advanced in the last 6 weeks since our last ARC 5 episode. That pace isn't an inconvenience that I'm complaining about, right? It's the actual proof of this thesis. The technology and the law covering it are both moving faster than the standard publication cycle can track. There's a personal cost too, because verifying 9 bills across 6 states, across checking a foreign constitutional court ruling from 2023, confirming a federal GAO report's exact finding, all before a Wednesday deadline, is hours of primary source verification that never make it on the screen or to the show. What you see is the finished doctrine, right? Not the discarded drafts and the sources I ruled out because I couldn't independently confirm it, right? Or shout out to my mom, T-Biscuit, right? Because she can see the stress on my face sometimes when I'm like, Mom, I'm doing this research. Right? And she's like, okay, baby. Like, for real. She sees it, man. And the cost confession exists because I decided transparency about the labor is part of the sovereignty commitment, not separate from it. If I'm asking you to trust doctrine over hype, I owe you proof the doctrine was always actually built. And I share this not for sympathy, but because sourcing is evidence. And you guys will soon find out when I drop my app, Vital Signal. You understand the importance of sourcing and the evidence, right? You're going to be reading the world's vital signs. It will be the world's most important app, right? And rather, you learn to demand it from every voice you listen to, right? Including mine. I don't extend that blind trust because a framework sounds sophisticated. I extend it because it's necessary, right? Now, we talked about the courts. Let's talk about the federal gap, right? Because the federal gap is important. And here's where the federal government actually stands, because the state patchwork only makes sense against what isn't happening in Washington. The Mine Act, introduced late 2025, go look it up, has still not cleared committee as of yet. Its own text does not create rights. It directs the FTC to study the issue, a study mandate, not a protection mandate. 46 states currently have zero neural data protection, meaning California, Colorado, Montana, and Connecticut remain the entire floor of protection for the overwhelming majority of this country. The GAO's April 2026 report called neural data a structural failure with a ticking time bomb clock attached to it, and specified that the employment scenario it raises is not speculative. An employer who can monitor whether workers are cognitively engaged, detect frustration in real time, or identify when someone is likely to resist a decision, holds a category of surveillance power that did not exist for any previous generation of workplace monitoring, right? Now, here's my language block. All right? Listen, an FTC study mandate typically takes years to produce findings, and findings aren't the same as enforceable rules. Do not wait on Washington to resolve this before taking the 5 steps that I'm about to mention. And I need you to take this stuff seriously, right? And do it tonight. It's your own life. Warriors, smarts, final bosses, motivators. We're talking about federal mind gaps, right? That was the layman's block. Now, let's bring it on back to layer 2. And layer 2 is where the merges consciousness sovereignty pillar meets hexadecimal's governance sovereignty pillar directly. Because every AI system that ingests shared neural data to refine a model, whether a focus prediction algorithm or a stress detection classifier sold to employers, is training on the exact behavioral substrate this framework exists to protect. That makes every such system an IntelliFix evaluation candidate today, not hypothetically. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, these are 2 products that I've already developed, right? They're under trademark and copyright parameters as we speak, right? Hexadecimal, AI governance tool for ethics. IntelliFix is the machine body that it runs on, right? And here's the mechanism. A company collects your neural signal to give you a focus score. That signal, aggregated across millions of users, becomes training data for the next model version. The model gets better at predicting focus, making the product more valuable, increasing the incentive to collect more signal, more users, more retainment longer. Nobody in that loop has to be malicious for it to erode sovereignty by default. This is why consent theater, the term we coined last week, matters as much as layer 2 as layer 1. A terms of service agreement disclosing your data trains further algorithms is technically compliant and functionality or functionally meaningless to a user with no framework for what that training actually produces downstream at scale for years. I'm talking about years on years, right? And here is a layman's block, right? Certification under hexadecimals, 6 C's isn't a one-time launch checkbox. It requires an ongoing audit trail showing exactly which neural data sources trained which model version, updated every time the model retrains. That's a genuinely higher bar than most AI governance frameworks demand of anyone. And it's a baseline requirement, not an aspirational goal. Motivators, final bosses, smarts, warriors, we're talking about consent theater, right? Let's move on, right? As we have a cause confession, we have to have an uncomfortable verdict. And here it is, right? Here it is. Because, and here it is in plain, right? Plain, with no softening, right? My warriors, this one's for you. And we're going to talk about you first, right? But everybody needs to hear this straight. No chaser. You cannot out-caution your way through layer 2 by simply refusing to buy a headset. Fitness trackers, sleep apps, VR headsets built for gaming, and workplace wellness platforms are all quietly adding biometric and neural adjacent sensing as an instrumental feature. Not a separate category, right? Not a separate category you can avoid by skipping one aisle inside the store. The infrastructure for layer 2 is being built into consumer technology broadly, faster than most people are tracking which of their existing devices already qualify, right? Do the math. The math is unforgiving. 96.7% of brain wearable companies already share data with third parties. 2/3 of a broader survey confirmed the same pattern a year earlier. 46 states offer zero legal protection. The one federal bill in motion creates a study, not rights. And the industry itself, by its own researchers' account, is privately deciding right now whether your brain data becomes the product, with nothing external forcing that decision in your favor, right? That means the protection you actually have tonight is primarily legal. It's behavioral, right? I'm sorry, not primary legally, right? It's behavioral. And it's incomplete by design until the law catches up. 4 states protect you by operative law. 46 do not. The math is not currently on your side, and pretending otherwise will be the real sovereignty violation, right? Now, let me drink some more coffee. Let's talk about the 5 steps of shared sovereignty protocol, right? Let's talk about the 5 steps, right? 5 concrete actions. My final bosses, you can treat this as seriously as, sorry, man, I apologize for that. I don't know where that came from. Seriously, as last week's personal sovereignty protocol. First, audit every device in your home and workplace that could possibly collect biometric or neural adjacent data in your home and workplace that whether it's for collecting the biometric data, neural adjacent data, right? And I'm not talking about just the headsets. That's obvious. I'm talking about fitness trackers and sleep apps, right? They count too. Second, find a specific sentence in each private privacy policy about third-party sharing. It's in there. No sentence within 5 minutes is itself your answer. Third, actually ask the deletion question from what we talked about earlier by email today. Many companies apply their strictest jurisdiction policies nationally rather than maintain 50 separate versions, so it's worth asking regardless of your state. And fourth, if offered a workplace wellness incentive involving biometric or neural sensing devices, you need to read the data governance terms before the enrollment terms, right? The health benefit is what they lead with. The data terms are what actually governs you for years afterward. Fifth, and this is something that most people skip, talk to somebody else about what you find. Sovereignty research that stays private doesn't build the norm shift Domininos said is urgently needed, right? And here's my lamest block. None of these 5 steps require a law degree, right? They require about a 30-minute read and a willingness to ask a slightly uncomfortable question. That discomfort is the signal the question needed asking, right? The 4 states that already passed protection laws didn't pass it because companies volunteered. They passed it because enough people asked enough uncomfortable questions loudly for long enough, right? Motivators, warriors, smarts, final bosses, personal sovereignty protocol. That's what we're talking about, right? That's what we're talking about. Now, let's take some stock before we close the loop tonight, right? We got about 10 minutes left. We named the 3 audiences receiving your shared data: the manufacturer, the third parties in its agreements, and your own employer. We named the legal gap. We talked about HIPAA, and how HIPAA doesn't reach here. We talked about 46 states offering nothing, and the one federal bill in motion that studies rather than protects. We named a business model fork every neurotech company is privately navigating right now. And the read channel infrastructure being normalized today that would carries tomorrow's right capability without needing to be rebuilt. We also named the precedent that already exists 3 years ahead of us in Chile. Proving accountability doesn't require waiting for a perfect statute. And we named 3 states: New York, Illinois, and Virginia, each choosing a different legislative tool for the same underlying problem in the same 6-week window, right? And if you need a layman's block, here it is, right? Here it is. If tonight felt like a lot, it's because it is a lot. And it is a lot on purpose. Layer 2 doesn't have one law, one villain, or one fix. It has a pipeline with multiple entry points. And sovereignty means knowing where each one is rather than trusting the pipeline to police itself. Final bosses, smarts, motivators, warriors, we're talking about the sovereignty gap. And that's my layman's block. Right? I know y'all think a lot of my shows about doom and gloom. They aren't. They're about truth. It's about honesty. It's about getting the information out to you, right? Because knowing, as they would say in G.I. Joe, is half the battle. Knowing is half the battle, baby. Look, we're almost done, man. Look, as we close, think about this. If you take exactly one thing from this show tonight, take this. Right? Take this. Sharing itself is not the enemy. Unaccountable sharing is. The technology that reads your focus to help you sleep better is not inherently hostile. The pipeline that quietly resells that same signal to a data broker, an insurer, or an employer without your specific informed knowledge is where the real sovereignty violation lives. Your job is not to reject that technology. Your job is to demand the pipeline show its work. Again, it's not science fiction, people. This is science for now. And this is what Merger Wednesdays is all about. We opened up tonight asking who's already building a door into the room that used to be unreachable, right? Now, you know some of the names, the manufacturers who write may share with third parties into a policy nobody finishes reading. The data brokers, right? New York is now trying to regulate. The insurers and employers Illinois folded into his genetic privacy law. And the 96.7% of an entire industry that made sharing the default rather than the exception. Listen, next merger Wednesday, we're going to go one layer deep into collective consciousness, which is layer 3. That's where individual data streams stop being individual at all, where population scale aggregation reveals patterns invisible in any single record, and where the living white paper already flags this as the highest urgency sovereignty gap in the entire structure. Because no national law addresses it directly. If layer 2 unsettled you tonight, I need you to sit with that. because layer 3 is where the framework says the real emergency begins, right? And for those of you who need it, my layman's block as we close. Look, set a reminder right now to actually do the audit from earlier, right? And do it this week. Rather than filing tonight away as something to think about later. Later is exactly how 96.7% became the baseline in the first place. Nobody decided that collectively. It accumulated one postponed audit at a time. Look, the sensei and I discussed something very, very similar to this last night. We were talking about data centers and a lot of this new emerging tech that people don't want in their communities, but they're not doing anything about it. If you don't read, if you don't act, then they're going to act on your behalf. And when they act on your behalf, you're stuck with the consequences, right? You're stuck with the consequences. The regulations are placed on you, the consumer. You're paying for it out of your pocket. Your tax-paying dollars that you work hard for. The money that you work hard for that you never get to see. Right? That you never get to see. You think you make $50 an hour. What you actually make is $35 an hour. $15 an hour goes to taxes. Right? Act. Read. Do. Right? And to my smarts, to my final bosses, to my motivators, to my warriors, the last room nobody could enter without your permission was never a place. It was your mind. And tonight we find out who's already standing at the door you opened yourself. Same time next week, the construction continues. Warriors, motivators, smarts, final bosses. We've been talking about shared consciousness. This is Merger Wednesdays on the Final Boss Podcast. Season 4, the Rebirth, Arc 5, the Declaration, Merger Wednesday 31, episode number 285 of the Final Boss Podcast. I am your host, the one, the only, the Final Boss, and this has been our show. Thank you for joining us, right? Thank you for joining us. And remember, there's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but there's always a heavier pain that comes with regret. I am here. We are here. And as always, be balanced, be equal, and be smart. And if I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is our show, ladies and gentlemen. That is our show. I will see you again tomorrow for Special Guest Thursdays. Special Guest Thursdays. Look, tomorrow, episode number 286, Special Guest Thursday. Either I'm going to be solo, I'm going to have a guest, or I'm going to do town hall. You got to tune in at 9 o'clock live to see. I'll see you then. Have a good night.
It's Merger Wednesday. The countdown continues. 7 years until the convergence of biology and machine. Neural interfaces are no longer theory. They're the scaffolding of a new consciousness. But what does that mean for identity? For free will, for the soul? This is where we build the frameworks for ethical, philosophical, and spiritual growth for the next phase of human evolution. We're not just upgrading hardware. We're rewriting what it means to be human. Each week, we explore the biotech breakthroughs, decode the cognitive shifts, and prepare the mind for the merge. This isn't about fear, it's about readiness. Because the future isn't waiting. It's already wiring in. This is about preparing human consciousness for the most significant leap in our species' history. If you think this is just about chips and brains, you're not ready. But we'll get you there, one Wednesday at a time. So sit back and relax as we take you on a journey on Merger Wednesday.